Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of your own execution. The emperor has ordered your death. You have minutes left. Maybe an hour. What would go through your mind? Would you beg? Would you break down? Would you curse the world for its injustice? Seneca didn't do any of that. When the Roman Emperor Nero ordered him to take his own life, Seneca calmly asked for his will so he could make final arrangements. When that was denied, he turned to his friends and said something extraordinary. Where are all those philosophical principles you've been studying for so many years? Surely you knew Nero's cruelty would come to this. And then, he prepared to die. Calmly. Peacefully. Almost, joyfully. How? How does a human being face the ultimate terror with complete tranquility? The answer lies in one daily habit. One practice that Seneca performed every single night for decades. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it is, and how to use it to conquer your own fears. Stay with me. Introduction. Before we dive into Seneca's secret practice, we need to understand something crucial about fear itself. Most of us spend our entire lives running from it. We avoid difficult conversations because we fear confrontation. We stay in jobs we hate because we fear uncertainty. We don't pursue our dreams because we fear failure. We don't speak our truth because we fear rejection. And hovering above all of these fears is the ultimate fear. The fear that shapes every other anxiety in our lives. The fear of death. Now, you might be thinking, I don't think about death that often. But here's the thing, you do. You just don't realize it. Every time you play it safe, that's the fear of death whispering in your ear. Every time you choose comfort over growth, that's death anxiety in disguise. Every time you scroll through social media for hours, numbing yourself, avoiding the hard work, that's your unconscious mind running from mortality. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago. They knew that until you confront death directly, you can never truly live. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Epictetus taught, "Keep death and exile before your eyes each day, along with everything that seems terrible. By doing so, you'll never have a base thought nor will you have excessive desire." But it was Seneca who took this principle and turned it into a daily practice. A ritual. A spiritual exercise that transformed his entire relationship with fear. This practice didn't just help him face death with courage. It helped him face life with courage. It made him sharper in business. Clearer in his thinking. More present with his loved ones. More willing to take risks. More generous with his time. Because when you've made peace with the worst thing that can happen, everything else becomes manageable. So what was this habit? Let me show you through a story. Not Seneca's death, but the moment that prepared him for it. Story/situation. The year is 41 AD. Seneca is at the height of his career. He's wealthy, influential, respected as one of Rome's greatest orators and philosophers. And then, in a single day, it all disappears. The new emperor, Claudius, exiles him to Corsica on false charges of adultery. His property is seized. His reputation destroyed. He's sent to a barren, desolate island where he'll spend the next 8 years in isolation and poverty. For most people, this would be a death sentence. Not physically, but spiritually. Imagine it for yourself. One day you're successful, surrounded by friends, living in comfort. The next day you're stripped of everything. Sent away from everyone you love. No clear path back. No timeline. No hope. How would you react? Here's how most of us would react. We'd spiral. We'd rage against the injustice. We'd become bitter, resentful, depressed. We'd spend every waking moment torturing ourselves with thoughts of what we lost. Why me? This isn't fair. My life is over. But Seneca didn't do that. Yes, he struggled. He was human. There are letters where you can feel his pain, his longing for home. But he didn't break. Why? Because for years before this moment, Seneca had been performing a nightly ritual. A practice he learned from his Stoic teachers. And this practice had prepared him for this exact scenario. Every single night, after the day was done, Seneca would sit in the quiet darkness of his room. And he would rehearse disaster. He would close his eyes and systematically imagine everything that could go wrong in his life. Losing his wealth. He'd visualize it, feel it, imagine living in poverty. Losing his reputation. He'd picture the gossip, the betrayal, the public humiliation. Losing his health. He'd imagine himself sick, weak, in pain. Losing his loved ones. He'd sit with that grief, losing his freedom. He'd visualize exile, imprisonment, captivity. And yes, he'd imagine his own death, not morbidly, but clearly, rationally, accepting it as the inevitable conclusion of life. This practice is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. And it's not what you think. This isn't pessimism. It's not negative thinking. It's not manifesting bad outcomes. It's the exact opposite. It's removing the power of fear through familiarity. Think about it this way. Why are horror movies scary the first time you watch them but less scary the second time? Because you know what's coming. The shock is gone. Your nervous system has adapted. Why do firefighters run into burning buildings while everyone else runs out? Because they've trained for it. They've visualized it. They've rehearsed it hundreds of times. The situation hasn't changed, but their relationship to it has. That's what Seneca was doing every night. He was defanging his fears by staring them in the face. So when exile actually happened, when he lost everything, his mind didn't shatter. Because he'd already been there in his imagination. He'd already felt that pain. Sat with it. Made peace with it. The exile was still difficult. But it wasn't surprising. It wasn't world-ending. It wasn't unfair. It was simply one of the many possibilities he'd already prepared for. Let me read you what Seneca wrote during his exile, in a letter to his mother. I have lost nothing. My virtues are with me. My character is intact. My mind is free. What else matters? The things I've lost, money, position, reputation, these were never truly mine to begin with. They were on loan. And all loans must eventually be repaid. This is not the writing of a broken man. This is the writing of someone who had been preparing for this moment his entire adult life. Now, let's bring this into your world. Lesson/explanation. Part 1. Why this practice works. Before I show you exactly how to do this practice, you need to understand why it works at a psychological level. There are 3 reasons. Reason number 1, it transforms abstract fear into concrete problems. Most of our anxiety is vague and shapeless. We say things like, I'm worried about the future, or I'm afraid things will fall apart. But what does that even mean? When fear is abstract, it's infinite. It's everywhere. It paralyzes you. But when you force yourself to get specific, what exactly am I afraid of? Losing my job. Okay, what happens then? I'd have to find a new one. I'd have to cut expenses. I'd have to ask for help. Suddenly fear becomes manageable. It's no longer a monster in the dark. It's a problem you can solve. Reason number 2, it reveals that you're more resilient than you think. When you actually walk through worst-case scenarios in your mind, you realize something profound. You'd survive. Not just survive, you'd adapt. You'd figure it out. You'd find a way. Humans are incredibly resilient. We've survived plagues, wars, famines, collapses. You personally have already survived every bad day you've ever had. But we forget this. We underestimate ourselves. The premeditation of evils reminds you, I am stronger than my circumstances. Reason number 3, it frees you to take bold action in the present. This is the real magic. When you're no longer paralyzed by the fear of loss, you become dangerous. You speak up in meetings. You start that business. You have that difficult conversation. You create that art. You take that risk. Because you've already accepted the worst outcome. So what's there to be afraid of? This is what Seneca meant when he wrote, he who has anticipated his disaster has already disarmed it. So, how do you actually do this practice? Part 2, the practice, step by step. Here's exactly how to perform Seneca's nightly ritual of premeditatio malorum. Step 1. Set aside 10 to 15 minutes before bed. Not in the morning. The morning is for building momentum, setting intentions, priming yourself for action. The evening is for reflection, processing, preparation. Find a quiet space. Sit comfortably. Turn off all distractions. Step 2. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing? Be honest. Be specific. Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your reputation. Maybe it's your sense of control. Write it down if you need to. Just get clear on what's actually creating anxiety in your life right now. Step 3. Visualize the loss in detail. This is where most people stop. They don't want to go here. It feels too painful. But you must. Close your eyes and imagine it actually happening. Not vaguely. Concretely, if you're afraid of losing your job, see yourself in that meeting. Hear the words. Feel the shock. Watch yourself packing up your desk. If you're afraid of a breakup, imagine the conversation. The silence. The empty apartment. If you're afraid of illness, imagine the diagnosis. The treatment. The limitations. Don't torture yourself, but don't run away either. Sit with the discomfort for a few minutes. Step 4, ask yourself, and then what? This is the crucial step. Because loss is never the end of the story. So you lost your job. And then what? I'd be scared for a while. I'd be angry. But then, I'd update my resume. I'd reach out to my network. I'd probably find something within a few months. Maybe something better. Maybe this would be the push I needed to finally pursue that other path I've been curious about. So the relationship ended. And then what? I'd grieve. I'd feel lonely. But then, I'd reconnect with friends. I'd rediscover myself. I'd eventually heal. I'd maybe meet someone more compatible. Or maybe I'd learn to love my solitude. Walk yourself through the entire arc. The loss. The pain. The adaptation. The survival. The eventual rebuilding. You'll realize, there's life on the other side. Step 5, extract the lesson. After you've visualized the scenario, ask yourself, what would this teach me? What strength would I discover? What illusion would this shatter? What would I learn about myself? Seneca's exile taught him that his peace of mind didn't depend on external circumstances. Your imagined losses will teach you the same thing. Step 6, return to gratitude. Open your eyes. Look around your actual life. Notice that the disaster hasn't happened. You still have what you have. Feel genuine gratitude for it. Not because you're entitled to it, but because you understand its temporary nature. This is the paradox. By imagining loss, you appreciate what you have more, not less. Seneca wrote, "He is a fool who is unhappy because he hasn't got what he doesn't have. But equally a fool is he who is happy because he has what he has, without recognizing it can be taken away at any moment." Let me give you a modern example. Part 3, Modern Application. Let's say you're an entrepreneur, and your biggest fear is business failure. Every day you're stressed. Checking metrics. Worrying about cash flow. Losing sleep. So one night, you sit down and do the practice. You imagine it. Really imagine it. The business fails. You have to shut down. You have to let your team go. You have to tell your family. You feel humiliation, shame, financial stress. And then, you walk through what happens next. You take a few weeks to recover emotionally. You'd probably get a regular job to stabilize your income. You'd spend time with your family, which you've been neglecting. You'd analyze what went wrong. Learn from it. You'd still have your skills, your knowledge, your network. You'd eventually try again, smarter this time. Or you'd find a different path that suits you better. You'd survive. You'd adapt. You'd be okay. Now, when you return to running your business the next day, the fear is still there. But it's quieter. It's no longer controlling you. You make better decisions because you're not operating from panic. You take calculated risks because you're not paralyzed by the fear of failure. You enjoy the journey more because you're not clinging desperately to the outcome. This is the power of the practice. It doesn't eliminate fear. It integrates fear. It transforms fear from your master into your advisor. Reflection. Now, let's come back to Seneca's final moment. The year is 65 AD. 24 years after his exile. Seneca has returned from Corsica. He's become the advisor to Emperor Nero. He's wealthy again, powerful again. And now, Nero has turned on him. A conspiracy has been uncovered. Seneca is implicated, probably falsely. Nero sends soldiers with a simple message. End your life. Seneca is 69 years old. And here's what happens. He doesn't panic. He doesn't plead. He doesn't rage. According to the historian Tacitus, Seneca turns to his wife and friends and gives them one final philosophy lesson. He asks for his will so he can leave his belongings to his loved ones. The soldiers refuse. So Seneca says, "Very well. Then I leave you the only thing I still possess, the example of my life." He embraces his wife. He tells her not to grieve excessively, but to remember his teachings. He opens his veins. The blood flows slowly because he's old and thin from years of simple living. To speed up the process, he asks to be carried to a warm bath. And even then, as his life is literally draining away, he continues discussing philosophy with his students. His last act is to pour a libation to Jupiter, the god of freedom. He dies peacefully, consciously, willingly. How is this possible? Because Seneca had died 1,000 deaths before this moment. Every single night for decades, he had rehearsed this. Not just death, but loss, betrayal, suffering, injustice. He had walked through every shadow, every fear, every disaster in his imagination. So when the real moment came, it was familiar. It was just another passage. Another transition. Another thing to be faced with courage and clarity. The Stoics had a phrase for this. Memento mori. Remember, you will die. Not as a morbid obsession, but as a liberation. When you remember you will die, you remember you are alive. When you remember you can lose everything, you remember what actually matters. When you face your fears every night, you become fearless every day. Let me ask you something. What would change in your life if you truly, deeply accepted that you could lose everything tomorrow? Would you still waste time on petty arguments? Would you still postpone that dream? Would you still hold grudges? Would you still play it safe? Or would you finally say the things you need to say? Do the things you need to do? Love the people you need to love? Live the life you're meant to live? Seneca wrote this in one of his letters. Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time. This is not about being reckless or nihilistic. It's about being awake. It's about recognizing that life is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. This is the only moment you're guaranteed. And the greatest tragedy is not death itself. It's reaching the end and realizing you never really lived because you were too afraid to lose. Conclusion/call to action. So here's what I want you to do tonight. Before you go to sleep, try this practice. Just once. Set aside 10 minutes. Sit quietly. Ask yourself, what am I most afraid of losing right now? And then, face it. Walk through it in your mind. The loss. The pain. The aftermath. The survival. The rebuilding. See yourself on the other side. And then return to this moment, this life, with fresh eyes. Notice what you still have. Feel gratitude for it. And then tomorrow, act like someone who has nothing to lose. Because here's the truth. You don't. Everything you have is temporary. Everything you are is temporary. But that's not depressing. That's freeing. Seneca knew this. Marcus Aurelius knew this. Epictetus knew this. And now, you know this too. The one Stoic habit that made Seneca fearless in the face of death was the same habit that made him fearless in the face of life. It's called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. And it's waiting for you tonight. Will you have the courage to try it? If this video resonated with you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Tell me, what fear are you going to face tonight? What worst-case scenario have you been running from? Share it below. Let's build a community of people who refuse to live in fear. And if you want more Stoic wisdom to transform your life, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because every week, I'm breaking down ancient philosophy that's more relevant today than ever before. Remember, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca. Stop suffering in your imagination. Start living in reality. I'll see you in the next one.